She was 7 months pregnant when her husband's mistress ripped the dress off her body. 400 guests watched. 400 phones recorded. 400 people did nothing. But the worst part? Her husband was smiling, filming the whole thing, like he'd been waiting for this moment his entire life. Elise thought her world had ended that night. She thought she'd lost everything, her dignity, her marriage, her future. She was wrong, because what her billionaire husband didn't know, her father had been watching him for 18 months, gathering evidence, building a case, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. By sunrise, $800 million had vanished. The merger collapsed. The FBI was at the door. And the man who tried to destroy his pregnant wife, he was in handcuffs. This is the story of the greatest satisfying revenge you'll ever hear. Stay until the end, trust me. You don't want to miss what happens next. The champagne glass slipped from Elise's fingers 3 seconds before she felt the first tug on her dress. Crystal shattered against marble. The sound cut through the string quartet's melody like a gunshot through silk. 400 heads turned in perfect synchronization. 400 pairs of eyes found her standing near the 12-foot ice sculpture, one hand pressed instinctively against her swollen belly. 7 months pregnant, ivory silk gown that had cost $14,000. Custom designed to accommodate her growing daughter while still making her look like the wife of Garrett Blackwood, tech billionaire, visionary entrepreneur, and tonight's host. The Grand Monarch Hotel ballroom sparkled around her. Crystal chandeliers imported from Venice cast prismatic light across every surface. White roses and gardenias perfumed the air with sweetness that suddenly felt suffocating. The string quartet had been flown in from Vienna specifically for this event. The annual Blackwood Technologies Anniversary Gala. 5 years of innovation, 5 years of growth, 5 years of lies she didn't know she'd been living. She felt the second tug before she could process the first. Someone was pulling at her zipper. Someone's fingers were on her back, gripping fabric, yanking downward with deliberate force. Elise spun around, her heel caught on the hem of her dress. She stumbled, but didn't fall. Not yet. Her pregnant belly shifted her center of gravity, made every movement feel dangerous and uncertain. Vanessa Drake stood behind her, 29 years old, vice president of marketing at Blackwood Technologies. Perfect red lipstick, the color of fresh blood. Perfect blonde waves that probably took 2 hours to achieve. Perfect smile that stretched across her face like a wound. "What are you doing?" Elise's voice came out wrong. Too high, too thin, too confused. The music continued for another 3 seconds, then stopped. The sudden silence was worse than any sound could have been. Vanessa's hand moved fast, faster than Elise could react. The zipper gave way with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet ballroom, a metallic rasp that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. "Let's see what Garrett's been stuck with for 5 years." Vanessa's voice carried across the room. Amplified. Someone had given her a wireless microphone, or she'd brought one herself, planned this moment down to the acoustics. "Let's see what he's been forced to come home to every single night while dreaming of something better." The dress fell. Elise grabbed at the fabric with desperate hands, caught some of it, missed the rest, her ivory slip, her maternity bra with its functional clasps, her pregnant belly exposed to the chandelier light, the stretch marks she'd been so self-conscious about suddenly visible to everyone she knew. She heard gasps ripple through the crowd like wind through wheat. She heard laughter. Actual laughter. From people she'd hosted at charity events. From people she'd considered friends. She heard the distinctive click of camera phones, dozens of them, capturing her humiliation from every possible angle. She searched the crowd for her husband. Her eyes swept across familiar faces. Board members she'd entertained at dinner parties, investors she'd charmed at fundraisers, wives she'd organized charity drives with, all of them watching, none of them moving. And then she found him. Garrett stood 20 feet away, 38 years old, dark suit tailored in Milan, dark hair silvering elegantly at the temples. The man she'd married 5 years ago in a ceremony overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The man who'd written his own vows about partnership and protection. The man who'd promised, in front of 200 guests and God himself, to shield her from every storm life might bring. He was holding up his phone, recording, smiling, not a shocked smile, not a confused smile, a satisfied smile, the smile of someone watching a plan come together exactly as intended. Garrett, his name tore from her throat like something with claws. Garrett, help me, please. He didn't lower the phone. He adjusted the angle instead, made sure he was getting the full scene. Her exposed body, her desperate hands clutching torn fabric. Her face contorted with confusion and dawning horror. Vanessa circled her slowly, deliberately, a predator sizing up wounded prey, taking time to enjoy the moment. Poor thing. Vanessa's amplified voice dripped with mock sympathy. Did you really think he loved you? Did you really believe any of it was real? Elise couldn't speak. Her throat had closed around the words. He's been mine for 18 months. Vanessa continued, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she walked. 18 months. Every conference where he was too busy to call, every late night at the office, every time he said he was too tired to touch you. She stopped directly in front of Elise, close enough that Elise could smell her perfume, something expensive and floral. He was with me, every single time. Elise's knees buckled. A server caught her elbow. Young man, maybe 22. His face was pale with shock. He was the only person in the room who seemed horrified rather than entertained. Ma'am? His voice shook. Ma'am, let me help you. She clutched the torn fabric to her chest with one hand, gripped his arm with the other. Her baby kicked hard against her ribs. Once, twice, 3 times, responding to the cortisol and adrenaline flooding her system. Someone call security. Elise's voice came out steadier than she felt. Survival instinct kicking in. Please, someone. The string quartet sat frozen with their bows suspended in midair. The bartenders had stopped pouring drinks. The catering staff stood motionless with trays of canapes growing cold in their hands. 400 people stared. 400 people she'd hosted at charity galas and holiday parties and intimate dinners. 400 people she'd laughed with and donated alongside and genuinely considered part of her social circle. 400 people doing absolutely nothing. Security was already moving, but not toward Vanessa, toward her. Ma'am. The head of security appeared at her side. Marcus Chen. She'd approved his Christmas bonus last December. Written him a personal thank you note for his dedication. Ma'am, we need you to leave. You're causing a disturbance. The words didn't make sense. She was causing a disturbance? She was the one half naked and crying? I'm causing a disturbance? The words scraped her throat raw. She just attacked me. She just ripped my clothes off in front of everyone, and I'm causing the disturbance? Ma'am, Marcus took her arm. His grip was firm, professional, the grip of someone following orders. Please come with us. We can discuss this privately. She looked at him, really looked. His jaw was tight. His eyes wouldn't meet hers. He knew what was happening. He knew it was wrong, and he was doing it anyway. Garrett's hire, Garrett's man, following Garrett's instructions. I'm his wife. The statement felt absurd leaving her mouth, like she needed to remind someone, like she needed to prove she belonged here. I'm Garrett's wife. This is supposed to be our party, our celebration. Not for long. Garrett finally spoke. He was still filming, still smiling. I want this documented for legal purposes. My mentally unstable wife attacked my colleague in front of 400 witnesses. Everyone here saw it. The crowd shifted, a collective movement toward agreement. She just grabbed her, someone said from the left side of the room, a woman's voice, familiar. Margaret Holloway, maybe. They'd served on 3 charity boards together. The poor girl was just standing there. Someone else added, male voice, deeper, Richard something. She danced with him at last year's gala. Pregnancy hormones. A third voice. Definitely female. Possibly Linda Chen, Marcus's wife. My sister went completely crazy during her 3rd trimester. Attacked her husband with a frying pan. Some women just can't handle the hormonal changes. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Elise felt the room spin. The chandeliers blurred into streaks of light. Her vision darkened at the edges. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if trying to wake her from a nightmare. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But it was. And somewhere in the chaos of her shattering world, Elise noticed something no one else did. A familiar face in the crowd, not watching the spectacle like everyone else, watching the watchers, recording on a different phone. A phone pointed at Garrett, at Vanessa, at the security guards, at the crowd's complicit faces. Brooke Sullivan, her best friend since freshman year at Stanford, event photographer for tonight's gala. The woman who'd held her hair back during morning sickness. The woman who'd helped her pick out nursery furniture. The woman who'd warned her years ago that something about Garrett felt off, recording everything, including Garrett's smile. Security escorted Elise through a service entrance, through industrial hallways that smelled of dish soap and hot food, past kitchen staff who averted their eyes, past servers who whispered to each other as she passed. Someone draped a coat over her shoulders, heavy wool, men's cut, probably belonged to one of the valets. Someone else handed her a pair of flats, black, plain, size too small but better than her heels, which she'd left somewhere on the ballroom floor along with her dignity. The October air hit her face like a slap when they pushed through the service exit. Cold, sharp, real in a way nothing else felt real anymore. She stood on the sidewalk outside the Grand Monarch Hotel, barefoot despite the flats someone had given her. She must have dropped them somewhere. She couldn't remember. Couldn't remember walking through the kitchen. Couldn't remember the service corridor. Couldn't remember anything except Garrett's smile and Vanessa's voice and the sound of her zipper giving way. Her phone was inside. Her purse, her shoes, her coat, her dignity. Everything except the child growing in her belly and the coat some stranger had thrown over her shoulders. A black sedan pulled up to the curb. Sleek, expensive. The Montgomery family car. Samuel Rodriguez emerged from the driver's seat, 62 years old, with her family for 30 years. He taught her to drive when she was 16, picked her up from college when she was homesick, driven her to her wedding 5 years ago. He took one look at her face and didn't ask a single question. He simply opened the door, helped her inside with the gentle hands of someone who'd known her since childhood, turned the heat up high, handed her a bottle of water and a package of tissues from the center console. "Where to, Miss Elise?" She opened her mouth to say home. The penthouse, the address she shared with Garrett, the place where her clothes hung next to his, where her toothbrush sat beside his, where their wedding photos still held pride of place on the mantle. The word wouldn't come. "My parents' house." Her voice sounded like it belonged to someone else, someone far away, someone drowning. "Take me home, Samuel. Take me to my real home." He nodded once, made a phone call on his Bluetooth, spoke in low tones she couldn't quite hear, probably alerting her parents, preparing them for what was coming. Elise pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window. Watched the city lights blur past, orange and white and red. Neon signs advertising restaurants and bars and nightclubs where normal people were having normal nights. A world that kept spinning while hers had stopped. Her reflection stared back at her. Smeared mascara, tangled hair, face pale as death. She barely recognized herself. She did what women do in crisis, what generations of women have done when the world falls apart. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Not yet, she calculated. Exit points, witnesses, the location of her phone, the prenuptial agreement she'd signed 5 years ago without really reading, the trust fund her grandmother had left her, the baby kicking inside her belly, the next steps, the next hours, the next days. She was already planning while dying inside. That's what women do. That's what survivors do. They plan, they calculate, they find the next handhold while still falling. The sedan pulled through iron gates, up a winding drive lined with oak trees her great-grandfather had planted, past the fountain where she'd caught fireflies as a child, to the house where she'd grown up, to the only place that had ever truly felt safe. Her mother was waiting at the door. Charlotte Montgomery stood in the doorway with light spilling out behind her. 58 years old but looking a decade younger, dressed in silk pajamas and a cashmere robe, hair still perfectly styled despite the hour. 23 years as a federal prosecutor. She'd put away cartel leaders and corporate criminals and men who thought their money made them untouchable. One look at Elise's face and every instinct came roaring back. Inside, Charlotte took her daughter's arm, pulled her across the threshold. Now, we have work to do. The door closed behind them. The nightmare was just beginning. The Montgomery estate smelled like safety, wood fires crackling in every fireplace. Her father's pipe tobacco, cherry-scented and familiar. Her mother's jasmine perfume, applied even at 2 in the morning because Charlotte Montgomery never appeared less than composed. Fresh coffee brewing in the kitchen. Old books and older money, in the particular stillness of a house where nothing bad had ever been allowed to happen. Elise made it to the foyer before her legs gave out. Her knees hit the hardwood floor. The impact jarred through her spine. Her pregnant belly made the fall awkward, unbalanced. She caught herself on her hands, palms slapping against wood that her ancestors had walked on for 6 generations. Charlotte caught her before she could collapse completely. Strong arms wrapping around her daughter, holding her upright, taking her weight. "I've got you." Charlotte's voice was steady, controlled. The voice she'd used in courtrooms when witnesses broke down. "I've got you, baby. You're safe now." Elise started shaking, not crying, not yet, just shaking. Full-body tremors that rattled her teeth and made her vision blur. He was smiling. The words came out in gasps. He was smiling while he filmed it, like it was funny, like I was funny, like our whole marriage was just a joke he'd been waiting to tell. "I know." Charlotte smoothed her daughter's hair. "I know, sweetheart, but you're here now, you're home, and we're going to fix this." "How?" And Elise looked up, met her mother's eyes. "How do you fix something like this? 400 people saw me. 400 people have photos, videos. By morning, it'll be everywhere. Everyone will know. Everyone will see." "Let them see." Charlotte's voice hardened. "Let them see exactly what kind of man Garrett Blackwood really is. Because by the time we're finished with him, the whole world is going to know." Footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, measured. The particular gait of a man who'd learned to command attention simply by entering a room. Theodore Montgomery appeared in the doorway of his study, 61 years old, silver hair that had once been the same honey blonde as his daughter's, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, wearing the ancient cardigan he'd owned since Elise was a child. The man who'd built a $4 billion media empire from a single failing newspaper. The man who'd never once raised his voice to his daughter. The man who was looking at her now with an expression she'd never seen before. Controlled fury. Elise. His voice was soft, gentle, the voice of her childhood, of bedtime stories and scraped knees and every moment when she'd needed her father to make the world make sense. "Come sit down. We have things to discuss." They moved to the study, Charlotte keeping one arm around her daughter, Theodore leading the way. The study was exactly as Elise remembered from childhood. Leather chairs worn soft with decades of use. Mahogany desks that her great-great-grandfather had shipped from England. Walls lined with books that Theodore had actually read, every single one of them, with notes in the margins and dog-eared pages. The faint scent of the scotch he drank in measured sips while working late. She sank into the chair nearest the fire. The same chair where she'd sat when she was 10 and her hamster died. When she was 16 and didn't get into her first choice college. When she was 25 and her first serious relationship ended. When she was 27 and Garrett Blackwood asked her to marry him. Her mother draped a cashmere blanket over her shoulders, the same blanket that had comforted her through every childhood illness. Soft and warm and smelling faintly of lavender. Her father poured water from a crystal pitcher, handed her the glass, watched her drink with eyes that missed nothing. "Tell us everything." Theodore sat across from her, not behind his desk where he conducted business. Across from her, where he'd always sat when listening to her problems. From the beginning, leave nothing out. Elise tried. God, she tried. The words came in fragments, shattered pieces of a shattered night. The gala was beautiful. Everything was perfect. The flowers and the music and the food. Garrett seemed happy. He was networking, shaking hands, being charming. I was proud of him. proud to be his wife. And then I was standing by the ice sculpture, and I felt someone pulling at my dress, and it was Vanessa. And she had a microphone, and she was saying things about 18 months, and everyone was watching, and Garrett was... She stopped, swallowed, forced herself to continue. He was smiling, Mom, Dad. He was standing there with his phone out, recording everything, and he was smiling, like he'd been waiting for this, like this was the plan all along. Her parents exchanged a look, quick, meaningful, the kind of look that couples develop after decades of marriage. A whole conversation in a single glance. Elise, Theodore leaned forward. His voice was careful now, measured. How much do you know about Blackwood Technology's actual financial position? The question made no sense. What? Your husband's company. What do you know about its finances? It's worth, I don't know, 3 billion, 4. We don't really discuss business at home. Garrett always said he preferred to keep work and personal life separate. He didn't want to burden me with the stress. Another look between her parents. Longer this time. Heavier. Sweetheart. Theodore reached into his desk drawer, pulled out a folder. Thick. Manila. Worn at the edges like it had been handled hundreds of times. Your husband isn't just a cheater. He's a fraud. And he's been planning this night for a very long time. The word hit her like a physical blow. Fraud. Her husband. The father of her unborn child. I don't understand. Theodore opened the folder, spread the contents across his desk. Photographs. Dozens of them. Garrett and Vanessa in restaurants, in hotels, in the back of cars, holding hands, kissing, looking at each other the way he used to look at Elise, back when she believed he loved her. Bank statements, accounts she'd never heard of, transfers to companies with names that meant nothing, numbers with too many zeros, email printouts, conversations between Garrett and people she didn't recognize, discussions of shell companies, offshore accounts, exit strategies, a timeline, 18 months long, every meeting documented, every transaction recorded, every lie cataloged. I've known since your second trimester. Theodore's voice was heavy. I hired private investigators when you first told us about the pregnancy. Something felt wrong. The way Garrett reacted when you shared the news, the way he looked at you, like you'd handed him a problem instead of a gift. Elise thought back to that moment, the pregnancy test, the tears of joy, Garrett's face when she told him. She thought he was shocked, overwhelmed, happy in a way that made words inadequate. Now looking at these documents, she saw it differently. The quick calculation behind his eyes, the forced smile, the way he'd immediately started talking about financial planning and prenuptial considerations and practical matters. He hadn't been happy, he'd been adjusting his timeline. The affair started 14 months before you got pregnant. Charlotte picked up one of the photographs. Vanessa and Garrett at a restaurant that Elise didn't recognize. Both of them laughing, comfortable, intimate. Vanessa Drake was brought into the company specifically for this purpose. She's not just his mistress, she's his partner in financial fraud. But Elise pressed her palm against her belly. The baby kicked weakly, stressed, scared, just like her mother. But why? If the company is successful, why commit fraud? Why risk everything? Because the company isn't successful. Theodore pulled another document from the folder, a spreadsheet covered in red numbers. Blackwood Technologies has been insolvent for over 2 years. Your husband has been running an elaborate Ponzi scheme, moving money between shell companies, falsifying earnings reports, lying to investors and board members and government regulators. The $800 million merger with NextGen that's supposed to close Monday? Charlotte continued. That's his escape hatch. His plan was to complete the merger, cash out his position, and disappear before anyone discovered the fraud. He's been building toward this for years. The room spun. Elise gripped the arms of her chair. But what does that have to do with tonight? With what he did to me? Her parents looked at each other again. This time, Elise saw something else in their expressions. Something that looked almost like pain. Sweetheart, Charlotte sat on the arm of Elise's chair, took her daughter's hand. Your prenuptial agreement states that in case of divorce, you receive 30% of his company's value, Plus, your trust fund remains completely intact and protected. I know that. We had lawyers review everything. If the company is worthless because of fraud, 30% of nothing is nothing. You'd walk away with only your trust fund. Okay, that's still $150 million. That's not nothing. No, it's not. Charlotte squeezed her hand. But if you were declared mentally incompetent before the divorce could be finalized, the prenup would be void. A court-appointed guardian would manage your assets, including your trust fund. The pieces clicked together, slowly, horribly, like watching a car crash in slow motion. Tonight wasn't random cruelty. Elise's voice came out as a whisper. It was a setup. Yes. He wanted witnesses, documentation, proof that I was unstable. Yes. He wanted to have me committed, to take my money, to... She stopped. Her hand moved to her belly. To take my daughter. Theodore's jaw tightened. We found draft paperwork on his computer, a petition for emergency psychiatric commitment, names of doctors willing to testify that you showed signs of prenatal psychosis, a letter nominating Vanessa Drake as your financial guardian. Vanessa. The name tasted like poison. He was going to give my baby to Vanessa. That was the plan. The room went silent. The fire crackled. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily, marking seconds that felt like hours. Somewhere outside, an owl called. A car passed on the distant road, normal sounds from a normal world that no longer existed for Elise Montgomery. She'd thought the worst moment of her life was standing half naked in front of 400 people while her husband filmed her humiliation. She was wrong. The worst moment was now. Learning that the man she'd married, the father of her child, the person she'd trusted more than anyone in the world, had been planning to steal everything she loved. Her money, her sanity, her daughter, her entire future. It wasn't betrayal, it was attempted murder of her entire existence. She wasn't crazy. She knew what she saw. She knew what he did. And now she knew why. What do we do? Her voice came out steady, stronger than she felt, stronger than she had any right to feel. How do we stop him? Theodore smiled, for the first time all night, a smile that reminded Elise why powerful men had learned to fear her father. We don't have to stop him, sweetheart. He pulled another folder from his desk, thicker than the first. Tonight he stopped himself. He gave us everything we needed, everything I've been waiting 18 months to get. He opened the folder. More documents, federal forms, legal filings, evidence summaries. The attack tonight, the video he made, the witnesses he thought he'd bought, it's all evidence now, evidence of conspiracy, evidence of assault, evidence of fraud and attempted financial abuse. Theodore's voice hardened. By morning, Garrett Blackwood won't have a company. He won't have freedom, and he won't have anything that belongs to you. Not your money, not your reputation, and certainly not your daughter. Elise looked at her father, at her mother, at the documents spread across the desk like weapons waiting to be deployed. She thought about Garrett's smile, his certainty, his absolute confidence that he'd won. He didn't know about the investigators, didn't know about 18 months of surveillance, didn't know that his father-in-law had been building a case against him while he built his own case against Elise. He thought he was the hunter. He was about to learn he'd been the prey all along. Her phone buzzed, not her phone, her mother's phone. Charlotte checked the screen. It's him. Charlotte's lip curled with disgust. Garrett, he wants to talk to you. Elise took the phone, read the message. Come home and we can discuss terms, or I release the video publicly. Your choice. You have until 9 a.m. She read it again. Then once more. He was threatening her. Still threatening her. Even now, after everything he'd done, he thought he had power over her. What do you want to do? Her father's voice was gentle. No pressure, no expectation. Just a question. Elise looked at the message, at the documents, at her parents' faces. Let him think he's winning. She handed back the phone. Let him think I'm scared and alone and desperate. And meanwhile, we destroy everything he's built. Her voice hardened into something she barely recognized, something forged in the fire of betrayal. Completely. Permanently. Until there's nothing left but ashes and regret. Theodore nodded, picked up his own phone. Started dialing. Then let's begin. Dawn crept through the study windows like a thief, gray light on old wood, shadows retreating to corners. The fire had burned down to embers, casting weak orange glow across documents that covered every available surface. Elise hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't done anything except read and process and try to understand how her life had become this nightmare. She sat surrounded by evidence of her husband's betrayal. 18 months of surveillance reports organized chronologically. Each page a new knife wound. Each revelation worse than the last. April 14th. Subject met with VD at Ritz-Carlton. 4 hours. Room service charged to corporate account. April 15th. Subject transferred $200,000 to offshore account registered in Cayman Islands. Transaction disguised as consulting fee. April 16th. Subject told wife he was at tech conference in Austin. Conference confirmed to be fabricated. No such event scheduled. She remembered April 16th. She remembered it perfectly because it was the day she decided to tell Garrett about wanting to start trying for a baby. She'd spent the morning preparing, made his favorite breakfast, cleaned the apartment, practiced her speech in the mirror. He'd called at noon, said the conference was running long, said he probably wouldn't be home until late, said he missed her. She'd made his favorite lasagna anyway. Left it warming in the oven. Written him a note on their nicest stationery. Whenever you get home, I'll be here. I have something wonderful to tell you. Love, your wife. She'd drawn a little heart at the bottom, silly, romantic, the kind of thing she'd done in the early days of their relationship. The lasagna had dried out. The note had sat untouched on the counter until morning. He'd come home at 2 a.m. and gone straight to bed without waking her. He'd been at the Ritz-Carlton with Vanessa. Elise opened her own calendar from that month. Her handwriting, her hopes, her blindness documented in blue ink. April 16th, Garrett coming home late, made his favorite lasagna. Maybe tonight we can talk about baby names. Decided to wait and tell him in person. They talked about baby names 3 weeks later, over cold takeout. He'd been distracted the whole time, checking his phone every few minutes. She'd thought he was stressed about work. He'd been texting Vanessa. Every memory was poisoned now. Every moment she'd cherished rewritten into something ugly. Their first anniversary dinner at that French restaurant, he'd excused himself 3 times to take calls. She'd thought he was important, in demand, the kind of man whose phone never stopped ringing because the world needed him. Now she understood he'd been coordinating with Vanessa, planning their next meeting while his wife waited alone with her champagne. The vacation in Cabo. He'd worked most of the trip. Laptop out by the pool, conference calls on the balcony. She'd told herself he was dedicated, ambitious, building a future for their family. In reality, he'd been transferring money, falsifying documents, building the framework of fraud that would eventually destroy everything. The night she told him she was pregnant, she replayed it in her mind. Her excitement, her joy, his face when she handed him the positive test. She thought the expression was shock, overwhelmed happiness, the look of a man whose deepest wish had just come true. Now she saw it differently. The calculation behind his eyes, the quick adjustment of plans, the realization that he had a new timeline to work with, a new vulnerability to exploit. He'd held her that night, whispered words about their future, their family, their forever. Lies. All lies. Every word. Elise pushed back from the desk. Her body ached. Her baby had been kicking for hours, responding to the cortisol flooding her system. Her back hurt. Her feet were swollen. Her eyes burned from hours of reading. She walked to the window. The sun was rising properly now, orange and pink and gold streaking across the sky like a painting. The same sun that had risen on her wedding day. The same sun that would rise tomorrow and the day after and every day until she died. The world didn't care about her pain. It kept turning, kept shining, kept going on as if nothing had changed, but everything had changed. Everything. There was a knock at the study door, soft, hesitant. "Come in." Her father entered. He hadn't slept either. She could tell by the shadows under his eyes, by the slight tremor in his hands as he carried 2 cups of coffee. "You should be in bed." He handed her a cup. "Dr. Patterson called. She wants to see you this morning. Make sure the stress hasn't affected the baby." "I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face. That smile." "I know." "How long?" She turned from the window, faced him. "How long have you known he was a monster?" Theodore sat heavily in the chair she'd vacated. Suddenly he looked every one of his 61 years, suspected from the beginning, when you first brought him home. There was something about the way he looked at this house, at the art on the walls, at your mother's jewelry. He wasn't looking at things. He was appraising them. "Why didn't you tell me? Would you have listened?" She wanted to say yes, wanted to believe she would have trusted her father's instincts over her own heart. But she knew the truth. She wouldn't have listened. She'd been in love, blinded by it, grateful that someone like Garrett wanted someone like her. The investigation started with routine background checks. Theodore continued, "Standard procedure when someone starts dating the heir to the Montgomery fortune. Nothing unusual turned up. Clean record, legitimate business, good reputation. But something felt wrong the way he proposed so quickly. The way he pushed for a short engagement. The way he seemed more interested in the prenuptial negotiations than the wedding planning." Theodore took a long sip of coffee. "I kept watching, kept digging. And 6 months after your wedding, I found the first irregularities in his financial reports." 6 months, Elise's voice cracked. "You've known for 4.5 years?" "I've suspected for 4.5 years, but suspicion isn't evidence, isn't proof, isn't anything that would hold up in court or convince my daughter that the man she loved was using her. So you just waited, watched. I gathered evidence, built a case, hired the best forensic accountants and private investigators money can buy." Theodore set down his coffee cup, met her eyes directly. "I was waiting for the right moment, waiting for something that would prove his intentions beyond any doubt. And tonight he gave us that proof. 400 witnesses to assault and conspiracy. Video evidence of his complicity. A recorded threat demanding your submission." Theodore's voice hardened. "Tonight he sealed his own fate. I just made sure I was ready to deliver the verdict." Elise processed this. Her father had known. All along he'd known. He'd watched her marry a monster, watched her build a life with a fraud, watched her get pregnant with a con artist's child. Part of her wanted to be angry, to rage at him for not stopping it, for not protecting her. But another part understood. He had been protecting her, in the only way that would work, by gathering the weapons she'd need when the inevitable came, by building the case that would destroy Garrett completely, by making sure that when her world fell apart, she'd have everything she needed to rebuild it. "I found something else last night." Theodore pulled a thin folder from inside his jacket. "Daniel Reeves, Garrett's CFO. He's been cooperating with federal investigators for 6 months. "What?" "Turns out Garrett wasn't as careful as he thought. He falsified some documents that implicated Daniel personally. Daniel didn't appreciate being set up as a fall guy." Theodore opened the folder. "He's been feeding information to the SEC, names, dates, account numbers, everything the feds need to bring RICO charges." "So the government already knows about the fraud?" "They've known for months. They were building their case, waiting for the right moment to act." Theodore smiled grimly. "Tonight accelerated their timeline. I made some calls. The SEC is announcing an emergency investigation this morning. Trading in Blackwood Technologies will be halted. The NextGen merger will be suspended, pending review. $800 million. Gone by morning, just like the title of the news stories that are about to run." Elise sank into a chair. Her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. The scope of what was about to happen finally hitting her. Garrett thought he was winning. Right now, in their penthouse, he was probably drinking coffee and planning how to spend her trust fund, calculating how long to keep her committed before the divorce, deciding what to name the daughter she'd never be allowed to raise. He had no idea that 18 months of surveillance had documented his every crime, no idea that his CFO had betrayed him, no idea that the federal government was hours away from destroying everything he'd built, no idea that his wife's family had been preparing for this moment since before she walked down the aisle. The video, Elise looked up at her father. He said he'd release it if I didn't comply. Already handled. My team accessed his cloud storage overnight. The original video Satyam has been deleted from all his devices, replaced with a message. What message? Theodore's smile was cold. It's all the smile that had ended careers and destroyed corporations and sent powerful men to prison. Looking for something, TM. On the initials of Theodore Montgomery, a signature, a warning, a promise of what was coming. For the first time in hours, Elise laughed. Brief, sharp, almost hysterical. Her husband had tried to destroy her, had planned for months to strip away her dignity, her freedom, her future, and he'd never realized that the whole time her family was building the weapons that would annihilate him. What happens now? Now we let him panic. Theodore stood. My media contacts have been briefed. The story breaks in about 2 hours, simultaneously across every major outlet. SEC investigation, fraud allegations, assault charges. By noon, Garrett Blackwood won't be able to book a reservation at McDonald's. And me? You go to the doctor. Make sure the baby is healthy. Make sure you're healthy. His voice softened. Everything else can wait. Your daughter can't. Elise placed her hand on her belly, felt the baby kick in response. Strong, insistent, alive. Whatever else happened, whatever came next, she still had this child, this future, this piece of herself that no one could take away. Okay, she stood, straightened her shoulders. Let's begin. 9:17 a.m. Garrett Blackwood sat in the penthouse he shared with his wife. White robe, bare feet, coffee in a mug that cost $300 because the artist was famous, and Garrett liked collecting things that made him feel important. He checked his phone for the 10th time in 5 minutes. No response from Elise. The deadline he'd given her had passed 17 minutes ago. She hadn't come home, hadn't called, hadn't begged for mercy the way he'd expected. Probably with her parents, he decided, crying on mommy's shoulder, letting daddy write checks to make the pain go away. That was fine. That was expected. The Montgomerys always thought they could buy their way out of problems. This time, money wouldn't help. He had 400 witnesses. He had video evidence. He had doctors willing to testify that Elise had shown signs of mental instability for months. By the time her father's lawyers even figured out what was happening, she'd be committed and he'd have control of everything. His phone buzzed. Google alert. He opened it casually, expecting the usual tech news, stock prices, industry gossip, maybe some favorable coverage of last night's gala. His PR team had been planting positive stories all week. Breaking: SEC announces emergency investigation into Blackwood Technologies. Trading halted. The coffee cup slipped from his fingers. Hot liquid splashed across his robe, across the marble floor, across the hand-woven Persian rug that Elise had picked out when they moved in together. He didn't notice. His fingers were already scrolling, already searching, already finding more alerts than his brain could process. NextGen pulls out. $800 million merger collapses. Amid fraud allegations. Blackwood CFO turns whistleblower. Federal cooperation revealed. Tech billionaire's empire crumbles. Insider trading investigation launched. No. The word came out as a whisper, then louder. No, no. His phone started ringing. Board members, investors, his lawyer, his PR team. The flood of incoming calls so constant that his screen never stopped vibrating. He ignored them all. With shaking hands, he navigated to his cloud storage, to the folder where he'd saved last night's video, the insurance policy, the leverage that was supposed to keep Elise in line. The folder was empty, not deleted empty. The folder still existed, but the files inside were gone. Every video, every photo, every document. In their place, a single text file. He opened it with fingers that trembled so badly he could barely tap the screen. Looking for something? TM Theodore Montgomery. Garrett stared at his letters until they blurred, until his vision went gray at the edges, until the reality of what had happened finally broke through his shock. They knew. They'd known all along. While he was planning and plotting and congratulating himself on his cleverness, the Montgomerys had been building their own case, gathering their own evidence, setting their own trap, and he'd walked right into it. He threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall, leaving a dent in the plaster. scattering pieces of screen and circuit board across the floor. "Garrett?" Vanessa's voice from the bedroom doorway. Sleepy, confused. She was wearing one of his shirts, her blonde hair tangled from sleep. "What's wrong? What's happening?" "We're finished." His voice came out hollow, empty, like something had died inside him. "It's over. Everything is over." "What are you talking about?" She was reaching for her own phone now, pulling up the news, her face going pale as she read. "The CFO was a rat." Garrett laughed. The sound was bitter, broken. "Daniel has been feeding the information to the feds for months. Every transaction, every shell company, every falsified report. They have everything." "That's not possible." Vanessa's voice sharpened, hardened. The sweet mask she wore for the public slipping away, revealing the predator underneath. "We were careful. The evidence was buried. Reeves was paid off. Not well enough, apparently. Then we released the video." She was pacing now, thinking, planning, the same way he'd seen her plan dozens of schemes over the past 18 months. "We stick to the plan. Elise is unstable. She attacked me. 400 witnesses will back that up. The video is gone." She stopped pacing. "What do you mean gone?" "Montgomery, her father. He took it, replaced it with a message." Garrett's legs wouldn't hold him anymore. He sank onto the couch. "He's known. This whole time. He's known everything." "How much does he know?" "Everything. The fraud, the affair, the plan to have Elise committed." Garrett laughed again. "He probably knew before I did. Probably knew before we even started." Vanessa's mask cracked completely. For the first time since Garrett had known her, she looked genuinely afraid. "Then we need to leave. Now, tonight. The accounts in Singapore are still active. The contacts in Dubai. If we move fast enough." Frozen. Garrett's phone was destroyed, but the notification had come through on his tablet. He held it up for her to see. "SEC emergency action. All assets associated with Blackwood Technologies frozen pending investigation." Everything is frozen. Every account, every asset, every escape route. "You're telling me we have nothing?" "I'm telling you that Theodore Montgomery has spent the last 18 months making sure that when this moment came, we would have nothing." Garrett looked at the woman he'd betrayed his wife for. "We're trapped. Completely. Permanently. Trapped." The doorbell rang. They both froze. The sound echoed through the penthouse. 3 chimes. Expensive custom doorbell that played a snippet of Mozart. Elise had chosen it because she said it was more welcoming than a buzzer. "Don't answer it." Vanessa's voice was sharp, commanding. The doorbell rang again, then pounding. Hard fists against the reinforced door. "FBI, open the door. We have a warrant." Garrett looked at Vanessa, at the woman he'd thrown away his marriage for, at the partner who was supposed to help him steal everything and disappear into luxury. She was already backing toward the bedroom, toward the window, toward the fire escape. "Where are you going?" "I'm not going to prison for you." Her voice was cold now, empty of any pretense of feeling. "I was never going to prison for you. That wasn't part of our deal." "Our deal?" He stood, moved toward her. "We're supposed to be in this together." "That's what you said. Partners, 50-50. "I said a lot of things." She was at the bedroom door now, one hand on the frame, ready to run. "You were supposed to be smart enough to not get caught. You were supposed to be worth the risk." She smiled, the same smile she'd used on him for 18 months. Cold, calculating, empty. "You weren't." She disappeared into the bedroom. He heard the window open, the fire escape rattling under her weight. By the time the FBI agents broke down the door, Garrett Blackwood was alone, standing in his penthouse, in his $300 coffee-stained robe, surrounded by evidence of a life that had just ended. "Garrett Blackwood." The lead agent's voice was calm, professional, almost bored. "You're under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit financial abuse. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." He didn't resist. What was the point? As they led him out in handcuffs, past the doorman who'd wished him good morning every day for 5 years, past the neighbors who'd attended his parties, and complimented his success. Past the life he'd built on lies and theft and the destruction of a woman who'd loved him, Garrett Blackwood had only one thought. He'd underestimated her. All along from the very beginning, he'd underestimated Elise Montgomery and her father in the truth. At the Montgomery estate, Elise watched the news coverage from her childhood bedroom. The room hadn't changed since she was 17. Lavender walls, white furniture, bookshelves still filled with the novels she'd loved in high school, a window seat where she'd spent countless hours reading, dreaming, imagining the future. She'd never imagined this future. Never dreamed she'd be 32, 7 months pregnant, watching her husband arrested on national television. Theodore's media empire ensured the story was everywhere. Every channel, every website, every social media platform. But not the story Garrett had planned. Philanthropist Elise Montgomery Blackwood allegedly assaulted at gala. Investigation underway. Witnesses come forward. It was clearly coordinated. 400 guests say they were pressured to lie. Blackwood CEO arrested in dawn raid. Assets frozen. Merger collapsed. Her phone buzzed constantly. A new device her mother had brought her, the number known only to family and close friends. Messages of support, horror, disbelief, apology. People she'd thought were friends reaching out to say they were sorry. They didn't know, they didn't understand. They'd been told it was a joke, a surprise, a game between husband and wife. Lies. All of them had been fed lies, and they'd swallowed them because lies were easier than truth. She ignored most of the messages, responded to a few. Brooke, her college roommate, her former boss from the nonprofit where she'd worked before marrying Garrett, the people who'd known her before, the people who'd loved her before, the people who might still be able to see her as something other than a victim. She walked to her closet, the same closet where she'd hidden Christmas presents as a child, where she'd kept her diary as a teenager, where she'd stored her wedding dress after the ceremony because she couldn't bear to give it away. The wedding dress was still there, wrapped in plastic, preserved, a monument to a marriage that had never really existed. She didn't touch it. Instead, she reached for a box on the top shelf, pulled it down carefully, opened the lid. Inside were photos from her pregnancy, every ultrasound image, every milestone, the first time she'd felt the baby kick, the day she'd learned it was a girl. She looked at her daughter's profile, the tiny nose, the fingers curled into fists, the heartbeat that had seemed like such a miracle when she'd first heard it. She'd been so happy that day, so certain that her life was perfect, that Garrett loved her, that their family would be everything she'd dreamed of. Lies. But not this. Not the baby. Not the daughter who was still growing inside her, innocent of everything her father had done. I'm going to keep you safe. She spoke to the photograph, to the future, to herself. I promise. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do, I'm going to keep you safe. Her mother knocked softly on the door, entered without waiting for a response, carrying tea on a silver tray. The same tray she'd used when Elise was sick as a child. Your father's team recovered the original video from Garrett's devices before he could distribute it. Charlotte set the tray down on the bedside table, sat on the edge of the bed. They also found a folder on his computer, labeled EM Commitment. I know, Elise's voice was flat. Dad showed me some of it. There's more, Charlotte hesitated. Falsified psychiatric evaluations dating back 8 months, predated prescriptions for medications you've never taken, a draft petition for emergency psychiatric commitment with your name already filled in, names of doctors who agreed to testify that you showed signs of prenatal psychosis. He really thought of everything. He thought he did. Charlotte paused. There's something else. About Vanessa. Elise looked up. What about her? Immigration picked her up at the Canadian border 2 hours ago. She almost made it, had fake documents, new identity, the works. But your father's people alerted the authorities. They were waiting for her. Good. Her real name is Natalia Volkov. She has outstanding warrants in 3 states under different aliases. Immigration fraud, identity theft, financial manipulation of vulnerable targets. She's been doing this for a decade, targeting wealthy men, helping them destroy their families. taking a cut when everything falls apart. Elise processed this. Another layer, another revelation, another piece of the nightmare puzzle clicking into place. So, Garrett wasn't special. No, he was just the latest mark. Charlotte hesitated. Or maybe she was his. We're still trying to figure out who recruited whom. Either way, they were partners, and now they're both finished. Mom. Elise set down the ultrasound photo, met her mother's eyes. Did I ever actually know my husband? Was any of it real? Charlotte was quiet for a long moment, the kind of quiet that meant she was choosing her words carefully. I think parts of it were real. She finally said, I think he probably did find you attractive, did enjoy your company, did appreciate what you brought to his life. She paused. But I don't think he was capable of loving you. Not really, not the way you deserved. I think Garrett Blackwood has only ever loved himself. Everyone else is just useful or not. I was useful. You were the key to a fortune he wanted. And when you became less useful, when you became a liability, he found a way to dispose of you. Charlotte's voice hardened. That's not love. That's not even marriage. That's predation. Elise closed her eyes, let the tears finally come, let herself grieve for the life she thought she had, for the husband she thought she knew, for the future she thought she was building. All of it ashes now. All of it gone. But not everything. She placed her hand on her belly, felt her daughter kick in response. What do I do now? Her voice came out small, childlike, the voice of a little girl asking her mother to make the monsters go away. Charlotte took her hand, held it tight. Now you heal. Her voice was gentle but firm. You take care of yourself and your baby. You let your father's lawyers handle the legal battles. You let the justice system punish the people who hurt you. She paused. And when you're ready, you build something new, something better, something that's truly yours. I don't know how. You'll learn. Charlotte squeezed her hand. You're a Montgomery. We survive. We adapt. We come back stronger than whatever tried to destroy us. She smiled. It's in our blood. Elise looked at her mother. At 58 years of strength and survival and grace under pressure. Charlotte had built a career on putting criminals behind bars, had walked away from that career to raise a daughter, had supported that daughter through every heartbreak and triumph and challenge. She hadn't just survived, she'd thrived. Maybe Elise could too. Okay. She wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders. Okay, tell me what happens next. 1 month after the gala, the legal proceedings had consumed everything. Every waking moment filled with depositions and court appearances and meetings with attorneys and witnesses and investigators. Elise sat in Harrison Wells' conference room for the 11th time in 30 days. Documents spread across the table. Her parents on either side. Lawyers everywhere. Across from her, Garrett sat with his own legal team. Orange jumpsuit replaced by an expensive suit. He'd been released on bail. $2 million. His mother had put up the money. The Blackwood family fortune, such as it remained after the SEC had frozen everything connected to the company. He looked diminished, smaller somehow. The confidence that had always seemed so natural, now obviously a performance, a mask that had slipped and couldn't be properly replaced. My client maintains that Mrs. Blackwood initiated the physical altercation. Garrett's lead attorney spoke. His voice was thin, defensive, the voice of someone arguing a case they knew was already lost. 400 witnesses can attest that 400 witnesses who have since recanted. Harrison interrupted smoothly. He slid a document across the table. After viewing video evidence that clearly shows Ms. Drake approaching Mrs. Blackwood from behind. After learning about the wireless microphone Ms. Drake was wearing to amplify her statements. After discovering that their host had instructed security personnel to remove the victim instead of the attacker. Those witnesses may have been pressured to change their... Pressured by whom? Harrison's voice sharpened. The Montgomery family doesn't need to pressure anyone. The truth is doing that work for us. Your client planned and executed an assault on his pregnant wife in front of 400 witnesses, then attempted to use those witnesses to support a fraudulent commitment petition. Every piece of evidence confirms this. Every document recovered from his devices confirms this. Garrett's attorney fell silent. flipped through the documents, found nothing to contradict the accusations. Furthermore, Harrison pulled another folder from his briefcase. Your client's financial fraud directly impacts the terms of their prenuptial agreement. The agreement stipulates that Mrs. Blackwood receive 30% of his company's value upon divorce. Since that company was built on fabricated earnings, falsified reports, and fraudulent investments, the agreement is void. The fraud charges are still pending until conviction. 8 federal indictments. Harrison smiled. Cold. Professional. 12 counts of wire fraud, 10 counts of securities fraud, conspiracy to commit financial abuse, money laundering. These aren't allegations anymore. The evidence is overwhelming. The CFO has cooperated fully. The paper trail is complete. He paused. Your client is facing 25 years minimum, 30 if the prosecutor decides to add the assault charges to the federal case. The room fell silent, the weight of those numbers pressing down on everyone present. 25 years, 30 years. Garrett would be in his 60s before he was eligible for parole, his 70s before release. Elise watched his face, watched the reality sink in, watched the last traces of hope drain from his eyes. She felt nothing. She'd expected to feel something. Satisfaction, vindication, perhaps even a flicker of sympathy for the man she'd once loved. But there was nothing. Just emptiness where emotions should have been. A hollow space where her marriage used to live. What are you proposing? Garrett's attorney finally asked. His voice was defeated. Full dissolution of the marriage. Complete transfer of all legitimate assets to Mrs. Blackwood. Termination of parental rights. Permanent restraining order. Harrison listed the terms like items on a grocery list. In exchange, Mrs. Blackwood will not pursue additional civil damages beyond what the court awards from the fraud recovery. You're asking my client to give up everything, his assets, his child, his entire life. I'm asking your client to recognize reality. Harrison's voice hardened. He planned to have his pregnant wife committed to a psychiatric facility. He filmed her assault for leverage. He was going to hand his daughter to a woman with multiple outstanding warrants under false identities. He leaned forward. No court in this country will grant him custody or visitation. No judge will look at this evidence and find anything redeemable in his behavior. We're offering to make this quick instead of prolonged. To spare everyone the cost of a trial that can only have one outcome. Silence again. Garrett looked at Elise. For the first time since the meeting began, their eyes met. Can I speak to my wife alone? His voice was rough, strained. Ex-wife, Harrison corrected. The divorce was finalized yesterday. And no, you may not speak to her alone. Please, something cracked in Garrett's voice. Just 5 minutes. I just want to explain. I just want her to understand. Elise studied him, the man she'd shared a bed with for 5 years, the man who'd held her hand during her first ultrasound, the man who'd smiled while watching her humiliated in front of everyone they knew. Fine, she stood. 5 minutes. Her mother's hand touched her arm. Warning, concern. She shook her head slightly. Some things had to be done alone. They moved to a small conference room. Glass walls, her father's security team visible through the windows. No privacy, but the illusion of it. Thank you. Garrett sat across from her. Thank you for giving me this. You have 4 minutes now. He flinched. I know you hate me. I don't hate you. The word surprised her, surprised him too, from the look on his face. I don't know you well enough to hate you. That's not fair. We were married for 5 years. We shared a life. We're having a child together. Were we? She tilted her head, studied him like a specimen under glass. Because I thought I was married to a tech entrepreneur who loved me. Turns out I was married to a con artist who was waiting for the right moment to steal everything I had, waiting for the right moment to destroy me. The company was real. The work was real. I just made some bad investments. Got in over my head. The fraud wasn't the plan. It was desperation. And Vanessa, he looked away. In the commitment papers, the fake psychiatric evaluations, the doctors who were willing to lie under oath. Her voice rose. She let it. Let 5 years of suppressed doubt and ignored instincts and swallowed concerns flood out. That was desperation too? I was going to let you go after. Once I had what I needed, I was going to make sure you were taken care of, comfortable, safe, in a mental institution, while your mistress raised my daughter." She laughed. The sound was sharp enough to cut. "That was your idea of taking care of me? It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How was it supposed to happen, Garrett?" She leaned forward, close enough to see the lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair, the hollowness behind his carefully composed expression. "Tell me, I really want to know. Paint me the picture of the life you planned to have after you destroyed mine." He was silent for a long moment, his hands flat on the table between them. Expensive manicure, gold cufflinks, all the trappings of success that meant nothing now. "I loved you." His voice broke. "In the beginning, I know you don't believe me, but I did. I really did." "In the beginning," she repeated, "before you realized my trust fund was worth more than your company. Before you found someone younger and prettier and more willing to help you commit crimes." Vanessa meant nothing. She meant 18 months. She meant conspiracy charges. She meant my daughter almost growing up without a mother. Elise stood. "We're done here." "Please," his hand reached for hers. She stepped back. "Just tell me you'll let me see her when she's born, just once, just to know what she looks like." Elise looked at him, at the tears in his eyes, at the trembling of his lips. She thought about forgiveness, about the kind of woman she wanted to be, about the kind of mother, the kind of example. She thought about her daughter, growing up wondering about her father, asking questions that had no good answers. She thought about everything Garrett had done, everything he'd planned, everything he would have taken if he'd succeeded. "No." The word landed like a gavel falling. "Please, you don't get to be part of her life. You don't get to know her name or her face or anything about her." Elise's voice was steady, final. "You lost that right when you decided to destroy me, when you chose money over your marriage, when you tried to take my daughter and give her to your accomplice. I'll change. I'll be better. Prison will do whatever prison does, but you won't be part of our lives, not ever." She walked toward the door, stopped with her hand on the handle. "Goodbye, Garrett." She didn't look back. The divorce was finalized within the week. Elise kept her trust fund, kept the properties purchased with legitimate money, kept full custody of her unborn daughter. Garrett kept nothing except federal charges and a mother who posted bail. At the final hearing, his lawyer made one last attempt. "Your Honor, my client requests only the right to be notified when his child is born, not custody, not visitation. Simply the basic human courtesy of knowing when his daughter enters the world." The judge looked at Elise. "Mrs. Montgomery, do you have a response?" She stood, 8 months pregnant now. Her daughter's due date only weeks away. "Your Honor," her voice was steady, controlled, the voice her mother had used in courtrooms for 23 years. "This man planned to have me committed to a psychiatric facility against my will. He planned to give my child to a woman now facing federal charges for identity theft and fraud. He filmed my assault and threatened to release the video publicly if I didn't comply with his demands." She paused. "He forfeited the right to basic human courtesy when he stopped treating me as human." The judge nodded. "Request denied." Outside the courthouse, the October wind bit through Elise's coat. A year since the merger had been announced. A year since Garrett started planning how to steal everything. A year since Elise's life became someone else's lie. Her mother waited by the car. "It's over." Charlotte's voice was soft, gentle in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. "No." Elise looked up at the gray sky and at the clouds promising rain, at the world that was still spinning, still turning, still going on. "It's just beginning." 2 months after the gala, Elise sat alone in her father's study. The house was quiet. Her parents at a charity function. Staff given the night off. Just her and the documents she couldn't stop reading. The surveillance reports had become an obsession. She read them every night, memorized dates and times, cross-referenced them with her own memories, her own calendar, her own pathetic attempts to believe her marriage was real. May 3rd, subject and VD attended charity gala as colleagues. Wife not present due to claimed illness. She remembered May 3rd. She'd had a migraine. Garrett said he'd stay home, take care of her. She'd insisted he go, represent the family, show their support for the cause. He'd come home at 2 a.m., smelling like perfume she didn't recognize. She'd asked about it. He'd said someone had hugged him too enthusiastically. Drunk donor, awkward moment. She'd believed him, gone back to sleep. Woke up the next morning grateful for a husband who would rather stay home with his sick wife than attend a glamorous party. Lies. All of it lies. June 15th. Subject transferred $100,000 to account in Vanessa Drake's name, listed as performance bonus. June 15th was their anniversary. He'd taken her to that French restaurant, the one with the waiting list 6 months long. He'd given her a diamond necklace, made love to her like she was the only woman in the world. The same day he'd given another woman $100,000, July 22nd. Subject and VD photographed entering hotel room at Ritz-Carlton. 4 hours documented. July 22nd was the day of her first ultrasound, the day she'd learned she was carrying a girl. She'd called Garrett immediately, crying with joy, leaving voicemails when he didn't answer, texting photos of the ultrasound image. He'd called back 3 hours later. Said he was thrilled, said he couldn't wait to be a father, said he was sorry he missed the appointment. Work emergency, unavoidable. He'd been in a hotel room with Vanessa, looking at his wife's messages, probably laughing about them, probably showing them to his mistress like a joke. Elise threw the folder across the room, documents scattered, pages fluttered. Photos of Garrett and Vanessa landed face up on her father's Persian rug. She stood, paced. Her pregnant belly made movement awkward, but she couldn't sit still, couldn't be calm, couldn't process the rage building inside her. 5 years. She'd given him 5 years of her life. She'd turned down the London position, the one she'd worked toward for years, the promotion that would have launched her career into the stratosphere. She'd said no because Garrett needed to be near Silicon Valley, because his work was more important, because a good wife supported her husband's dreams. His dreams were fraud. His work was lies. She'd sacrificed her future for nothing. She'd stopped seeing friends he called negative influences. Rachel, who'd always been too honest about her concerns. Miranda, who'd asked too many questions about Garrett's business. Jade, who'd flat out told Elise she didn't trust him. They'd been right, all of them, and she'd cut them out of her life because her husband asked her to. She'd made herself smaller, quieter, easier. She'd stopped wearing red because he said it was too attention-seeking. Stopped sharing opinions because he said she was too argumentative. Stopped laughing too loudly because he said it was unbecoming. She'd erased pieces of herself, one by one, to make room for him. And the whole time he was laughing at her, the whole time. The rage built, pressure behind her eyes, heat in her chest, her hands shaking with the need to hit something, break something, destroy something the way he tried to destroy her. Her phone rang. She ignored it. It rang again and again. She grabbed it to throw it across the room with the documents. The caller ID stopped her. Brooke Sullivan, her best friend, the one person who'd never stopped telling her the truth. She answered. I heard you're alone tonight. Brooke's voice was casual, too casual. I'm coming over. I'm fine. You're reading those files again. I can hear it in your voice. Brooke, 20 minutes. I'm bringing wine. Non-alcoholic for you, obviously, but I need the real stuff to hear about whatever spiral you've worked yourself into. The line went dead. Elise looked at the phone, at the scattered documents, at the photos of her husband with another woman. 20 minutes. 20 minutes to pull herself together, to look like someone who was coping, someone who was healing, someone who wasn't drowning in rage with no outlet and no relief. She started picking up documents, organizing them, putting them back in their folders where they belonged. Her hands shook the whole time. Brooke arrived in 18 minutes, let herself in with the keys she'd had since college. She found Elise in the study. Documents organized, face composed, the perfect image of someone who had everything under control. Brooke looked at her for exactly 3 seconds. You're not okay. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're barely holding it together. I can see your hands shaking from here. Brooke set down the wine bottles, crossed the room, pulled Elise into a hug. Stop pretending with me. I'm the one person you don't have to pretend with. The walls cracked. Elise sobbed into her best friend's shoulder. Ugly sobs, the kind she hadn't let herself have since that first night. The kind that shook her whole body and made her a baby kick in protest. I'm so angry. The words came out broken, fragmented. I'm so angry and I don't know what to do with it. I can't sleep, I can't eat, I can't stop thinking about all the times he lied and I believed him. All the times I defended him to people who saw the truth. All the times I chose him over my own instincts. You're allowed to be angry. I want to hurt him. I want him to feel what I feel. I want him to lose everything the way I lost everything. He is losing everything. It's not enough. Elise pulled back, wiped her face. It's not enough. Nothing will ever be enough. He took 5 years of my life. He tried to take my daughter. He tried to take my sanity. And he's going to sit in prison and read books and lift weights and eventually get out and start over somewhere else. While I spend the rest of my life dealing with what he did. Brooke was quiet for a long moment. You're right, she finally said. It's not fair. It's not enough. Nothing about this situation is just or balanced or right. She paused. But you have two choices. You can let the anger eat you alive, or you can turn it into something else. Like what? Like fuel. Brooke sat on the couch, patted the space beside her. Sit, let me tell you about something I've been thinking. Elise sat, her baby kicked, restless, responding to her mother's emotions. After the gala, I had nightmares for weeks. Brooke's voice was quiet, confessional. I kept seeing your face the moment you realized what was happening, the moment you found Garrett in the crowd, the moment you understood that he wasn't going to help you. Brooke, let me finish. She took a breath. I've photographed a lot of events, seen a lot of things, but that night was different. That night I saw something that made me understand, really understand how powerless women can be. Even women with money, even women with families who love them. When the person who's supposed to protect you decides to destroy you instead, there's almost nothing you can do. Elise listened, waited, but you did something. Brooke continued, you survived. You didn't let him win. You fought back with everything you had and you're still fighting. She paused. What if you could help other women do the same? What do you mean? A foundation, a nonprofit, whatever you want to call it. Something that provides resources to women in situations like yours. Legal help, financial support, therapy, the things you had access to because of your family's money, the things most women can't afford. Elise was quiet, processing. You have the resources, the connections, the platform. Brooke pressed. Your story is going to be everywhere. The trial, the divorce, all of it. People are going to know what happened to you. What if you turn that into something that actually helps? I don't want to be a symbol. Then don't be. Be a founder, be a scientist, a CEO, be someone who builds something instead of just surviving something. Brooke paused. Turn the anger into action. That's the only way it doesn't destroy you. Elise looked at her friend, at 33 years of loyalty and honesty and love. Thought about the anger burning in her chest, the rage that had nowhere to go. Thought about other women. Women like Catherine, Garrett's first wife, who died under suspicious circumstances. Women like the investors he'd defrauded. Women trapped in marriages to men who seemed perfect until they weren't. A foundation. She said the word slowly, testing it. The Montgomery Foundation for Financial Justice. Brooke smiled, or whatever you want to call it. But something real, something that matters. Elise placed her hand on her belly, felt her daughter moving inside her, something real, something that mattered, something to build instead of just burning. Okay, the word came out stronger than she expected. Let's do it. Margot Adelaide Montgomery was born on a Tuesday in December. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, dark hair like her grandmother, blue eyes that would probably change, perfect rosebud mouth that immediately learned how to cry. Elise held her daughter for the first time in a hospital room filled with white flowers, her parents in the corner, Brooke snapping photos, the morning light streaming through windows that looked out on a world transformed. Hello, baby girl. Her voice was thick with tears, the first good tears in months. I'm your mama. I'm going to show you everything beautiful in this world. I promise. Margot yawned, stretched, settled against her mother's chest. This was what mattered. This was what had survived. Not the lies, not the betrayal, not the legal battles or the public humiliation or the 5 years of marriage that had never been real. This small, perfect person, this future, this love that needed no proof because it simply was. Theodore approached the bed, his granddaughter's eyes already searching for sounds, for light, for the new world she'd entered. She's beautiful. His voice was rough. She looks like you did the day you were born. She's ours. Elise smiled. Completely ours. The first 3 months were a blur. Sleepless nights, endless feedings, the particular exhaustion of new motherhood compounded by everything else she was carrying. Elise hired help, a night nurse, a nanny for the daytime hours when she needed to sleep or work or simply exist as someone other than Margot's mother. She felt guilty about not doing everything herself, about not being the perfect mother who handled every moment with grace and patience. Her mother talked her out of the guilt. You're not abandoning her by accepting help. Charlotte's voice was firm during one of her daily visits. You're making sure you have the energy to be present when it matters. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. But the nights were the hardest, when the house was quiet, when Margot slept in her crib, when there was nothing to distract Elise from the thoughts that circled like vultures. She couldn't stop thinking about Garrett. Not missing him, not that. Whatever love she'd felt had died completely, replaced by something cold and hard and certain. But wondering, always wondering, had any of it been real? Had there been a moment, any moment, when he'd actually loved her? Or had the entire marriage been performance from the first smile to the last betrayal? She thought about their wedding day, the vows he'd written, the tears in his eyes, the way his voice had shaken when he promised to love her forever. Had that been real? Or just another lie? She thought about the night she told him she was pregnant, the way he'd held her, whispered about their future, their family, their forever. Had that been real? Or the beginning of a plan to steal everything? She thought about all the quiet moments, the morning coffees, the lazy Sundays, the thousands of small intimacies that made up a marriage. Had any of it been real? The questions circled endlessly, never landing, never resolving, never letting her rest. One night, 3 a.m., Margot crying for the 4th time, Elise found herself sobbing on the nursery floor. Not from exhaustion, not from frustration with her daughter, from grief. Grief for the marriage she'd thought she had, for the husband she'd thought she knew, for the future she'd thought she was building. All of it had been fiction. A story she'd told herself while someone else wrote the ending. I don't know who I am anymore, she whispered to Margot, who'd finally fallen asleep against her chest. I don't know who I was before him, who I'm supposed to be now. Her grandmother's lullaby came to her, the one she'd learned as a child, the one she'd planned to sing to her daughter someday, in a nursery decorated with love, with a husband who cherished them both. She hummed it softly. Off key, broken. Close your eyes, sweet child of mine. The stars are bright, the night is fine. Tomorrow brings another day. Sleep now, love, and dream away. Margot stirred, settled, slept. Elise sat on the floor of the nursery, her back against the wall, her daughter in her arms, and let herself grieve. Not for Garrett, not for the marriage, for herself, for the woman she used to be, for the innocence she'd lost and would never recover. That's what they don't tell you about betrayal. It's not just losing the person who hurt you, it's losing the version of yourself who could trust completely. Who could love without reservation? Who could look at the world without searching for hidden threats? That woman was dead. The woman holding this baby was someone else, someone harder, someone more careful, someone who would never again believe without evidence, trust without verification, love without protection. Was that wisdom or just another kind of wound? Elise didn't know. All she knew was that she was still here, still breathing, still holding her daughter, while the sun rose over a world that had almost destroyed her, still alive. That had to count for something. 6 months after Margot's birth, the townhouse on West 73rd Street had been transformed. What was once a private residence, inherited from a great-aunt Elise barely remembered, was now the headquarters of the Montgomery Foundation for Financial Justice. Fresh paint on the walls, soft gray and warm white. Professional but welcoming. The kind of space where someone in crisis might feel safe enough to ask for help. New furniture in every room, desks and computers and filing cabinets, conference tables and comfortable chairs. A children's corner with toys and books for the kids who would inevitably accompany their mothers. A staff of 8 that would soon be 20. Lawyers, social workers, financial counselors, intake coordinators who answered the phone that rang constantly, from women who'd seen Elise's story on the news and recognized their own. Brooke had quit her photography's job to manage communications. She said it was temporary. Elise suspected it wasn't. You know this is insane, right? Brooke adjusted a frame on the wall of Elise's office. A photo of Elise and Margot, mother and daughter, survivors. Insane is what they called me at the gala. That's not what I mean. I know what you mean. Elise looked around the room, at everything she'd built from the wreckage. You mean I'm turning the worst night of my life into something that helps other people? You mean it's unusual, unexpected, maybe even a little unhealthy? Is it unhealthy? Elise considered the question, really considered it. No, she decided. I think it's the only thing keeping me sane. Having purpose, having something to build instead of just things to survive. Her phone buzzed. A message from the intake coordinator. New case. Woman in Connecticut. Husband hiding assets before divorce. 3 children under 10. No resources. No family support. No idea what to do. Elise forwarded it to the legal team. The 15th case this week. The foundation had been officially open for 3 months. They couldn't help everyone. Couldn't solve every problem. Couldn't undo every wrong, but they could help some people. Could make some difference. Could prove that survival wasn't just about enduring, but about building. The sentencing is today. Brooke's voice was carefully neutral. Elise nodded. She'd known. Had been trying not to think about it. Garrett's federal trial had concluded 2 weeks ago. 23 counts. Guilty on all of them. Today the judge would announce his sentence. Are you watching? I don't know. You don't have to. I know. They stood in silence for a moment. The sounds of the foundation around them, phones ringing, key or clicking, voices in the conference room where new staff were being trained. Margot has a doctor's appointment at 2. Elise checked her watch. I should go. Elise. She stopped at the door, turned. Brooke crossed the room, pulled her into a hug. I'm proud of you. Her voice was fierce. Whatever happens today, whatever he gets, you already won. You know that, right? Elise hugged her back, held on for a moment longer than usual. I know. But she wasn't sure she believed it. The sentencing was broadcast on every major network. Elise watched from her parents' living room. Margot in her lap. Her mother beside her, her father in his study, probably monitoring 6 different coverage streams simultaneously. Garrett stood before the judge. Gray suit, gray face, gray everything about him now, like the color had drained out along with the confidence. Garrett Blackwood. The judge's voice was cold, formal, the voice of someone about to deliver a verdict decades in the making. You have been convicted of 23 federal counts including securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Your crimes affected hundreds of investors, destroyed countless lives, and were committed with a callousness that shocks even this court. Elise held Margot a little tighter. The evidence presented shows that you systematically defrauded investors for years, that you plan to have your pregnant wife committed to a psychiatric facility to gain access to her assets, that you filmed her assault and used it as leverage, that you showed no remorse for any of these actions until you were caught. Garrett's lawyer whispered something in his ear. He didn't respond. It is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for at least 10 years. 18 years. Elise did the math. Margot would be grown by the time he was released, finished with high school, maybe finished with college, a woman instead of the baby sleeping against her mother's chest. Court is adjourned. The screen cut to analysts, talking heads discussing the sentence, whether it was too harsh, too lenient, whether justice had been served. Elise turned off the television. "How do you feel?" Her mother's voice was gentle. "I don't know." She looked down at Margot, at her daughter's face, peaceful in sleep. "I thought I'd feel something. Relief, satisfaction, closure. But I just feel tired." She paused, and maybe a little sad, not for him, for the life I thought I was going to have, for the future I planned that never existed. Charlotte took her hand, held it. "That's not weakness, that's grieving. And you're allowed to grieve, sweetheart. Even if what you're grieving was a lie, it was still your life, your hopes, your dreams." Elise leaned against her mother's shoulder. Let herself be a daughter for a moment instead of a mother, instead of a founder, instead of a survivor. "What do I do now?" "Now," Charlotte stroked her hair, "now you keep going, keep building, keep raising that beautiful girl in your arms." She paused. "Now you live the life he tried to take from you, and you make it so full, so rich, so beautiful, that his absence becomes irrelevant." Margot stirred, blue eyes opening, looking up at her mother with the absolute trust of an infant. Elise smiled down at her daughter. "Okay," she said, to her mother, to her daughter, to herself. "Okay, that's exactly what I'll do." 1 year after Margot's birth, the Montgomery Foundation had grown beyond anything Elise had imagined. 300 cases in 12 months. Women across the country who'd found their way to the foundation's doors. Some walked away with resources, legal representation, financial counseling, therapy referrals. Others found community, support groups, connections to others who understood what it meant to survive the unsurvivable. Not every case had a happy ending. Some women returned to abusive partners. Some couldn't escape their situations despite every resource offered. Some lost their battles in court, in arbitration, in the complicated bureaucracy of systems designed to maintain power rather than distribute justice. But many cases did have happy endings. Women who left, who rebuilt, who discovered versions of themselves they'd never known existed. That's what kept Elise going. The successes, the proof that survival was possible. That destruction wasn't destiny. She was in her office reviewing case files when her assistant knocked. "There's someone here to see you." Rachel's voice was uncertain. "She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important. Says she has information you need." Elise looked up. "Information about what?" She wouldn't say, but she mentioned Vanessa Drake. Elise went very still. Vanessa, or Natalia Volkov, or whatever name she was using now. The woman who'd helped Garrett plan everything, who'd stripped Elise's clothes off in front of 400 people, who'd planned to raise her daughter while Elise rotted in a psychiatric facility, deported to Russia, facing additional charges there, supposed to be locked away forever. Send her in. The woman who entered was in her late 50s, elegant in a worn way, the kind of elegance that came from old money that had been depleted but not forgotten. Gray hair swept back, pearls at her throat, hands that shook slightly as she clutched her purse. "Mrs. Montgomery." Her voice was cultured, East Coast, old family. "Thank you for seeing me. I know I don't have an appointment." "Please sit." Elise gestured to the chair across from her desk. "You mentioned Vanessa Drake." "Yes." The woman sat, composed herself. "My name is Patricia Whitmore. My son Jonathan married Natalia Volkov 4 years ago. Her name was Sophia Marchetti then. Italian heritage, family and wine importing. All of it was fabricated, every word." Elise leaned forward. "Tell me everything." Patricia's story spilled out over 2 hours. Jonathan had been a successful architect. Not wealthy by Blackwood standards, but comfortable. Well-respected. Engaged to a woman named Sophia who'd swept into his life like a summer storm. She was charming. Patricia's voice cracked. "Everyone loved her. I loved her. She made Jonathan so happy. Happier than I'd ever seen him." They married within 6 months. A beautiful wedding. Everyone optimistic about their future. Then things started changing. Small things at first. Jonathan stopped calling as often, stopped coming to family dinners. He said Sophia needed him at home. Said she had anxiety about social situations. Said she preferred quiet evenings, just the two of them. Isolation, the first step in any abuser's playbook. Then the financial problems started. Jonathan's accounts mysteriously depleted. His credit cards maxed out. Bills unpaid despite his substantial income. He told us he'd made bad investments, made mistakes. He was embarrassed, didn't want help. Sophia said they'd figure it out together. By the time the family realized what was happening, it was too late. She cleaned him out. Everything, his savings, his retirement, his inheritance from his father. Patricia pulled tissues from her purse, dabbed at her eyes. Then she tried to have him declared mentally incompetent, said he was delusional, paranoid, dangerous. The same playbook Garrett had tried to use on Elise. The legal fees bankrupted us, Patricia continued, fighting the commitment petition, trying to prove what she'd done. We couldn't afford investigators, couldn't afford forensic accountants. All we could do was watch while she destroyed him. Where is Jonathan now? Recovery facility. The breakdown was severe. 2 years of treatment. He's finally starting to improve. Patricia reached into her bag, pulled out a folder, but he kept everything, documents, emails, text messages, everything she sent him, everything that proved what she really was. She slid the folder across the desk. I've been waiting 4 years for someone with the resources to use this. Her voice was fierce now, determined. When I saw your story on the news, I knew. I knew it was the same woman, same methods, same destruction. Elise opened the folder, pages and pages of evidence, another victim's pain, documented and preserved. The federal case against her is ongoing, Elise said carefully. Additional charges, immigration violations, fraud in multiple states. I know, I've been following it, but this evidence might help, might prove a pattern, might ensure she never gets out. Elise looked at the documents. At 4 years of another family's nightmare. I'll make sure this reaches the right people. She met Patricia's eyes. And I'll make sure Jonathan's story matters. Patricia started crying. Relief, gratitude. The particular grief of someone who'd been carrying a burden too long. Thank you. Her voice broke. Thank you for seeing me, for listening, for caring. Elise stood, walked around the desk, took Patricia's hands. Thank you for being brave enough to come forward. She squeezed gently. That's what strength looks like. Not never falling, helping others so they don't fall as hard. The evidence transformed the federal case. Additional counts filed, additional victims identified. A network exposed that stretched across continents. Harrison delivered the updates over the following weeks. 12 women confirmed. His voice carried satisfaction through the phone. 12 wealthy men targeted over a decade. Natalia Volkov has been extradited back to the United States to face trial. She's not getting out. Ever. And Garrett? Is he connected to any of this beyond what we knew? The prosecutor is investigating. Harrison paused. There's a possibility he wasn't her first collaboration. A woman named Catherine, his first wife. The one who died in the car accident. Yes, they're reopening the investigation. Elise processed this. The possibility that Garrett hadn't just tried to destroy her, had actually destroyed someone before her. I don't want to know. She decided. Whatever they find, I don't need to carry it. Understood. She hung up, sat in the quiet of her office. Patricia's folder was still on her desk. Evidence of 4 years of pain. Evidence that would help put Natalia Volkov away forever. Evidence that one woman's courage could make a difference. Elise picked up the phone, dialed Patricia's number. Mrs. Whitmore, this is Elise Montgomery. She smiled. I thought you'd want to know. The prosecutor just filed 12 additional counts. Your evidence made the difference. Jonathan's story mattered. She heard Patricia crying on the other end. Happy tears this time. Thank you. Patricia's voice was thick. Thank you for using it, for not letting it disappear. Thank you for trusting me with it. Elise paused. How is Jonathan? Better. He's coming home next week. First time in 2 years he's felt ready. That's wonderful. It is. Patricia took a shaky breath. Mrs. Montgomery, when he's well enough, when he's ready. Would you consider talking to him about what you went through, about how you rebuilt? I think it might help. Elise thought about Jonathan, a man she'd never met, destroyed by the same woman who'd helped try to destroy her. Of course, she said, whenever he's ready, the foundation is here for anyone who needs it. She hung up, looked around her office at the photos on the wall, the cases she'd helped, the lives that had continued because someone reached out a hand. This was why. This was the purpose behind the pain. Not revenge, not justice in some abstract sense. Connection, community. The simple, radical act of helping someone else survive what you barely survived yourself. Her phone rang again. The intake coordinator. Mrs. Montgomery, we have a new case. Woman in Florida, 3 children, no resources. She saw your story on the news and send me the file. Elise interrupted. I'll review it tonight. The work continued. The foundation grew. And somewhere in a federal prison, Natalia Volkov learned that her victims had finally found each other, that they were stronger together than she'd ever imagined. 2 years after the gala, Elise stood at a podium in the grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria. The foundation's second annual conference, 400 attendees, survivors, advocates, lawyers, therapists, politicians, journalists, the same number of people who'd watched her stripped and humiliated 2 years ago. A completely different world. Good morning. Her voice was steady, clear. My name is Elise Montgomery. 2 years ago, I was stripped naked at a party while my husband filmed. I was 7 months pregnant. I was alone. I thought my life was over. She paused, let the words settle over the room. I was wrong. 400 faces watched her. 400 people who'd chosen to spend their weekend learning how to fight financial abuse, how to help survivors, how to change systems that protected abusers instead of victims. The woman I was that night no longer exists, Elise continued. She died on a sidewalk outside a hotel, barefoot and alone. But the woman I am now, she was born that same night. As she thought about all the speeches she'd given over the past 2 years, the interviews, the testimonies, each one a little easier, each one reaching a few more people. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that survival is easy. Her voice strengthened. It's not. Every day is a choice. Every moment is a decision to keep going when everything inside you wants to stop. She thought about the dark nights, the grief, the rage that had nowhere to go. I'm not going to tell you that justice is guaranteed. She continued. It isn't. Systems fail, courts fail, people who should protect us fail. She thought about all the cases the foundation couldn't help, all the women who'd fallen through the cracks. But I'm going to tell you this. She leaned forward. You are not alone. The shame you feel isn't yours. The voice in your head telling you it was your fault is a liar. And there are people in this room, in this foundation, in this movement, who will fight beside you until you're strong enough to fight for yourself. Standing ovation. 400 people rising to their feet, clapping, some crying, some nodding with recognition, some taking notes for the work they would do when they left this room. Elise let it wash over her, not the applause, the connection, the knowledge that 2 years of pain had led to this moment, 2 years of building, 2 years of purpose, 2 years of turning destruction into something that mattered. After the speech, the reception, people wanting to talk, to thank her, to share their own stories. A young woman approached, early 20s, nervous, hands twisting together. Mrs. Montgomery, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm sorry to bother you, but I needed to tell you something. Take your time. Elise touched her arm gently. What's your name? Rebecca. She was wearing white, simple dress, hopeful despite the shadows in her eyes. I was engaged last year. He was perfect. Everyone said so. My parents loved him. My friends loved him. Elise waited, patient, knowing where this was going. I found the emails, Rebecca continued, the accounts I didn't know about, the woman he was seeing, the plan to... She stopped, swallowed. The plan for after we were married. You found out before. Because of you. Rebecca looked up, met Elise's eyes. I saw your story 6 months ago, the signs you missed, the things he said, The way he made you feel crazy for asking questions. She paused. I recognized all of it, every single thing. And you left. I left. Rebecca smiled, trembling but real. I packed a bag and I left that night, before the wedding, but before he could do what he planned. Elise felt something expand in her chest, something warm and bright. You saved yourself, she said. That's the hardest thing, and you did it. Because of you, Rebecca's voice broke. Because you were brave enough to tell your story. Because you didn't hide what happened. Because you showed me I wasn't crazy. Elise pulled her into a hug, held her while she cried. You're not crazy, she whispered. You never were, and now you're free. After the conference, Elise went home. The townhouse was quiet, Margot asleep with the nanny, her parents at their estate, staff gone for the day, just her in the silence. She walked through the rooms of the foundation, past desks where lives had been changed, past conference rooms where plans had been made, past walls covered with photos of women who'd survived. 2 years ago, she'd been a billionaire's wife, hosting galas, attending charity events, looking pretty on her husband's arm. None of it had meant anything. None of it had mattered. Now she was Elise Montgomery, founder, fighter, mother, survivor. All of it meant something. All of it mattered. She climbed the stairs to the apartment above the foundation, the private space where she lived with Margot, small by her former standards, perfect by her current ones. Margot was asleep in her crib, 2 years old now, dark curls against the white sheet, rosebud mouth slightly open, breathing the soft, steady breath of childhood dreams. Elise stood in the doorway, watching her daughter sleep, thinking about everything that had led to this moment, the gala, the assault, the divorce, the trial, the foundation, the hundreds of cases, the thousands of small victories, the journey from destruction to purpose. I did it, she whispered to the sleeping child. I built something real, something that matters, something you can be proud of. Margot stirred, didn't wake. Elise walked to the window, looked out at the city lights. 2 years ago, she'd stood at a different window, in her parents' house, watching the sun rise on the worst day of her life, wondering if she would survive, wondering if survival was even possible. Now she knew the answer. Survival wasn't just possible, it was a beginning. The beginning of something better than what she'd lost. The beginning of a life that was truly her own. She thought about Garrett in his prison cell, serving 18 years for crimes she'd almost been destroyed by. She didn't hate him anymore, didn't feel anything for him at all. He was irrelevant now, a chapter that had ended, a footnote in a story that had become so much bigger than his betrayal. She thought about Vanessa, or Natalia, facing her own trial, her own justice, her own ending, both of them trapped by the consequences of their choices. While she was free, free to build, free to help, free to love her daughter without fear, free to be whoever she chose to be. Mama, Margot's voice, sleepy, small. Elise turned, crossed to the crib, lifted her daughter into her arms. I'm here, baby girl. She kissed Margot's forehead. I'm always here. Story? Margot's eyes were half open. Hopeful. What kind of a story? Princess story. Elise smiled, carried her daughter to the rocking chair in the corner, settled her against her chest. Once upon a time, she began, there was a princess who thought she needed a prince to save her. She thought her happily ever after depended on someone else, on a castle, on a crown. Margot snuggled closer, listening. But then something terrible happened. Something that changed everything she thought she knew. Bad guy? Yes, a bad guy, someone she trusted who hurt her very much. Then what? Elise smiled, rocked slowly, felt her daughter's weight against her heart. Then she learned something important. She learned that she didn't need a prince, didn't need anyone to save her. She had the strength all along. She just needed to find it. Did she find it? She did, and she used it to help other princesses who were scared and alone. She built a castle where anyone who needed help could come, and she lived happily ever after. With the prince? No, baby. Elise kissed her daughter's hair. With herself, that's the best kind of happily ever after. Margot was asleep before the story ended, breathing soft and steady, trusting completely. Elise held her, rocked her, watched the city lights sparkle through the window. Somewhere out there, women were struggling, trapped in marriages that were prisons, trapped in relationships that erased them, trapped in lives that had been stolen by people who should have loved them. Tomorrow she would be there for as many as she could reach. Tonight she held her daughter and let herself feel something she hadn't expected. Peace. Not the peace of forgetting, not the peace of moving on. The peace of having survived something terrible and turned it into something beautiful. The peace of knowing exactly who she was. The peace of having built a life that was truly, completely, unapologetically her own. Sleep well, baby girl, she whispered to her daughter. Tomorrow we save the world. Outside, the stars shone over the city, the same stars that had watched her fall, the same stars that now watched her stand. Elise Montgomery, mother, founder, fighter, survivor. The woman who'd been stripped of everything and built something greater from the pieces. The woman who'd learned that the worst night of your life can become the foundation for the best version of yourself. The woman who discovered that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about what you build when you put yourself back together. And that's how Elise Montgomery turned the worst night of her life into the foundation of everything beautiful that came after. If this story touched your heart, if it made you angry, if it made you believe in justice, then do me a small favor. Hit that like button. It tells me you want more stories like this. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you think should have happened to Garrett. I read every single one. Share this with someone who needs to hear that survival is possible, that starting over is possible, that the people who try to destroy us don't get to write our endings. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because every week, I bring you stories of women who refused to stay broken, women who fought back, women who won. Thank you for staying until the end. It means more than you know. Until next time, remember, you are stronger than you think, and your story isn't over yet.